That was a handful from here. So shifting on from moving to the West Coast to down to the Southeast, like I said, Florida sports is just unbelievable. 5 years that Florida has been in the Stanley Cup final with Tampa and the Florida Panthers. I've been happy and excited about it. You watch Tampa Bay win a Super Bowl, you watching Miami with the fastest, receiving core, and then Jacksonville, hopefully they pick themselves back up. But joining us, who I thought, honestly, I was really impressed by, but a lot of young names, Paolo Banchero, we got a lot to talk about from here. Philip Rossman-Reich joining us. Philip, you've been covering this team for a long time now. For young players, Shaquille O'Neal, Victor Oladipo, Dwight Howard, and now Paolo Banchero. This was more than exceeding expectations for what the Magic have been building up for quite some time, right?
Yeah, you expect a young team, obviously, to kind of grow up and get better gradually. But I don't think any of us saw the Magic kind of taking the leap that they took this season. And really, we all expected Paolo Banchero was going to be in the All-Star conversation, but for him to have the playoff series that he had in his debut, it really feels like this isn't just, they got the number one picks. Obviously they got a talented player. It's like, we've got a dude. We've got a guy that we can really build around. And that's something the Magic haven't had in a decade.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, when I think of the Orlando Magic, you've been through it. You've been through the waves of the real good, the real ugly, and then the kind of, middle of the pack. But I'm very excited for the hopeful of the future because I think of the Magic, OKC, and Indiana that have really played up well to their potential with the draft and development. So when you look back at the playoff run and what the expectations are for next season, I think you got to get a veteran in this building. You got to get somebody that's really going to complement well with Paolo Banchero. What have been some targets you've been evaluating to really kind of get the next step for the Magic?
Yeah, this match, a big thing that I've been kind of preaching to people is you can't lose what makes this Magic team unique. And the biggest thing that makes them unique is they have 2 6'10" playmaking forwards. You don't want to take the ball too far out of Paolo Banchero or Franz Wagner's hands. And so you're kind of threading a very narrow thread because you want to, Paolo's 21, Franz is 22. You want to give them room to explore the canvas a little bit still. Like you're winning, the winning window's open. You're trying to win basketball games. But you still want to give them room to make mistakes and learn what the limits of their games are. But if you watch the playoffs against Cleveland, and look, Orlando got it to 7 games. Like they were half away from winning, maybe less than that. They really needed another ball handler. They really needed an organizer. I agree. They really needed a veteran. I'm a big proponent of what I call the Horace Grant theory, like having a veteran who's been there, won before in your starting lineup, kind of ease, like calming everyone down, helps a young team out a lot. Having Shaq helps too, but Horace, I like the difference between the 94 Magic and the 95 Magic is Horace Grant, in my opinion. And so I think that's something the Magic should be looking for. But Orlando is not looking for someone sort of to get in the way. And so they got a lot of cap room this summer. There's a lot of names we've been looking at. Most of them have been guards and point guards, Malik Monk, D'Angelo Russell, Tyus Jones. We've looked at trades for DeJounte Murray, Trae Young, Anthony Simons. There are a lot of options on the table for this Magic team, and picking the right one and kind of facilitating this team's continued growth is going to be the biggest challenge for them as they look to build off of what they did last season.
Yeah, and the blueprint of it, it's built up very well to where they get that right guy that is very open to basically passing the ball, opening up space, attacking the perimeter, and even getting a guy setting up for those wing shots right there. That's what's going to be the big difference maker. So when you think of, the coaching side of things really took a huge step because, again, Orlando's been going through coaches and players after player. But when you think about this collectively, the coaching aspect from the staff, this really did change a lot to where now, this team in the East, because the East is wide open. Outside of Boston, there's many mixtures of teams. Milwaukee just went through a burnout, and then a bunch of other teams. this has got to get you excited for what potentially the Magic can do the next few years.
Yeah, and look, you're looking at the playoffs as they are now. We got a 5 seed in the finals in Dallas. The Magic were the 5 seed in the East this year. Indiana was a 6 seed, and they took advantage of an injured Milwaukee team. You whatever path you have to get there, you get there. Orlando was the 2 seed in the East, or 3 seed in the East. The last Sunday before the final week of the season, they had a really tough schedule to end the season. They fell back to 5. And could have fallen to 8, actually, if they lost the last game of the season. That's how tight the margins are in the Eastern Conference. They have to consider themselves right in the mix. And so, Orlando obviously built themselves on their defense. They've got a star player in Paolo Banchero, who showed he could step up on the big stage. They got a lot of young talent. It's now about, okay, how do we get the offense up to a level where it's at least competent and getting easier shots for our best players so that they don't have to work as hard, so that they're able to play later into games and have the energy and stamina to play later in the games. And, it's kind of a simple thing. You just got to add more talent. The Magic have a lot of young guys. They leaned on a lot of young guys. And now you just want a little bit more consistency. Maybe you need outside shooting. Obviously the Magic were 24th in the league in 3-point field goal percentage, 29th in attempts. They had actually the worst offense in the league among all teams that made the postseason. That tells you how good their defense was last year. They just got to find a way to get easier shots and get their best players some easy shots so that they're not working so hard all the time.
Yeah, and it's funny, but at the same time, it makes me happy when the fact that I'm watching small market teams literally work the books, and at the same time they're working the analytics to even really kind of break through and break way to where they can be a competitive and relevant team. I mean, so when I think about this, and I spoke a little briefly about it with college hoops, I mean, besides the women's college sports, I mean, they had a great year. And then when I look at the men's side, we could have done better. But I think when you think of the development and even coming up to the NBA draft, I make the argument, the draft and development, you got to make it better, because it's like this one and done deal. What we've seen in college just doesn't work no more. If I get in a guy that is at least 2-3 years experience in college, like what I'm getting in the NFL on a daily basis, that could help you to really develop, and especially a lot of these marketed teams that could build the relevance. I just hope, honestly, with this NBA lottery, I just really hope that they abolish this thing. I mean, your opinions on this, because honestly, Adam Silver's got to get this right to where they can structurize it, make it consistent, and hoping they could get more domestic stars to be built up where they are really taking the NBA, because it's more international than anything else.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a tricky issue, I think, for the NBA. And the NBA is obviously kind of in bed. Like, they help run USA Basketball, do a lot of the marketing for USA Basketball. It's a development, it's a grassroots problem. I don't think it's an NBA problem. The NBA kind of receives guys as they get them. They have the rules set that it's, you got to spend 1 year in college or be 1 year out of high school. There was talk, at least in this last round, that they were going to get rid of that rule, go back to allowing players to come straight from high school. They eliminated the G League Ignite program because they were no longer competitive with NIL in college. But I would say, one thing, I think the NBA is a lot better prepared now to develop these young players. Mm-hmm. But unlike previous generations, now the NBA has to be a development project. Now the NBA has to, the development that might have taken place in the 80s and 90s in college, where guys become veterans, they understand a higher level of basketball, because they were with, great coaches like Coach K or Dean Smith or Roy Williams or Lon Kruger or whoever, Jim Boeheim, David Thompson, whoever your favorite college coach is. Instead of getting that development and maturity in the college level, the NBA had to kind of take on that responsibility because they were taking players younger and younger. You will notice, though, and yes, the guys at the top are still the guys at the top. Talent always wins. But you'll notice now more and more teams are taking players, or a lot of the successful rookies are players who stayed in school for a long time. Like Jaime Jaquez from Miami is a great example. That is a Heat player through and through. He came in ready to play. And look, you're 21 years old. You're going to get better. You still need some development. But the NBA over the last 10 to 15 years has had to become a development outfit as much as anything else. And so you have to spend time and be patient enough to let young players develop, whether they develop into stars or not. I would argue the NBA for the longest time kind of farmed out making stars to the college game. You went to college, big NCAA tournament, you're entering the league as a star. Because college basketball has become a lot more flat and has become a lot more, there's a lot more parity in college basketball, I think. Those stars aren't developing the same way anymore. And I think the NBA, frankly, has done a really, and I speak about this as a team, as a person that follows a small market team. The NBA has done a really, really poor job promoting their new wave of stars. Like, I love these playoffs. I think you mentioned it with the previous guest. This playoffs feels like a changing of the guard. It does feel like the baton is being passed. And I'm really excited about that as an NBA fan. But, I think the TV ratings have been pretty good. We don't need to get into, kind of the politics of the TV ratings or whatever it is. But the NBA, I think, has generally done a very poor job telling you Anthony Edwards is worth your time. Luka Doncic is worth your time. Jason Tatum is worth your time. They put LeBron and Steph Curry on TV 30, 40 times a year because they know they're cash cows. They know people will watch them, even though their teams aren't good and their teams are out of the playoffs. The big complaint here in Orlando, Paolo Banchero has had one regular season national TV game on TNT or ESPN since he got drafted. He was the number one pick in the draft. Only one national TV game. We love that he had a big playoffs. I would hope that means the Magic will get 4 or 5, but we're not hoping for much more than that because we know the Lakers will get their 20, 25. The Warriors with Steph Curry will get 20, 25 as well. And it's not that those teams don't deserve it. They're entertaining. They draw eyeballs. But I think a lot of this is now the NBA has to take a little bit more onus to tell its audience, these are stars worth your time. It's not a surprise these guys are doing well in the playoffs.
Yeah. No, 100%. And you know what? What's kind of funny that I would like to add up on it, because I'm watching sports like, the NHL. They've got, these international games where they're playing up in Sweden. They're playing up in a bunch of areas. Major League Baseball just came off of a series with the Phillies and Mets in London. So I'm like, well, if we could trim the games and at least make it to where it's enough for all of the players to be 110% healthy, why not maybe add a little something where if you're going international,
the league does that though. Like the Magic played a game this year in Mexico City against the Hawks. They gave up a home game to play in Mexico City. They have a game in Europe every year. They went to Paris. They went to either Paris or Berlin this year. No, they went to Paris this year. I think it was Cavs Nets. Wembanyama and the Spurs are going next year as well. So, and then they do some international games. They have games up in Canada and on the west part of Canada, since the Raptors are in Toronto. I believe they do games in Abu Dhabi during the preseason as well. They do games overseas. Obviously, they haven't been back to Beijing since the Daryl Morey thing. But the NBA knows, like, this is why I tell people about the NBA. Like, for people who denigrate the NBA, like, the NBA is certainly the most popular American sport in the world. Basketball is probably the second most popular sport in the world behind soccer. The NBA is doing fine, getting that international eyeballs on them. It's now about, okay, same thing that happened after Michael Jordan retired. LeBron is about to retire. Steph Curry's going to come right behind him. Kevin Durant's going to be right behind them. How do you kind of pass the baton to the next generation? And we saw this after Jordan retired. It was really hard for the NBA to get people to buy into Allen Iverson. There's maybe a lot tied into there. It took a while for people to buy into Kobe in the way that they ultimately did. They kept saying, this is the next Jordan. It's Grant Hill. It's Iverson. It's Kobe. It's this player, it's T-Mac. It's Carter. It's, they kept trying to find the next Jordan. It's just like, no, just promote these players. And obviously I think we're in a different media environment than we were 10, 15 years ago. And so I think, I think the way the NBA thinks about how to promote their product is, frankly, the NBA is progressive in its business with everything. except for their TV placement and how they promote their TV. And I'm hoping like bringing in Amazon helps, shift some thoughts and say, okay, we're going to do something a little bit different here. But the NBA just seems so afraid to go away from the players that they've milked for the last 20 years. They're going to have to pass that baton and convince people like, hey, LeBron is great. We're not saying he's not great. Here's some LeBron for you, but check out some Anthony Edwards. Check out some Luka Doncic. Check out some Tyrese Halliburton. Like, honestly, like the in-season tournament was a great experiment. I loved what they did with that. The Indiana Pacers being a darling and being a surprise team, they should have had 3-4 national TV games. They should have been a big deal in the immediate aftermath of that. Mm-hmm. They didn't add another national TV game for the Pacers. Pacers only had one national TV game after the in-season tournament, and it was in February after all the hype around them kind of died down. That is, like, I love the Magic to death, obviously. I cover them. They're a slow-down defensive team. They're not a made-for-TV team. The Pacers are, we're going to play fast. We're going to shoot a lot of threes. We're going to push the tempo. That is a made-for-TV team. That Pacers team, and obviously they made the conference finals, so there was something to it. That team should have been on national TV a lot, and they should have been making Tyrese Halliburton a star. And frankly, I see that as a failure on the NBA's part.
I'm such a foodie guy, and I almost want to feel like, you know what? I need to have a one-on-one conversation with Adam Silver and go to one of the most 5-star buffets that I got and say, oh, try this, try that. Get the mind going a little bit, because you can never go wrong with having multiple choices, multiple different flavors, something that could really kind of spice things up that can make the league a lot better with it.
Yeah, for sure. And look, the diversity in this league is awesome. The diversity in play styles. I know people like to say it's just a 3-point league, and it's not. If you're watching the games, it's not. And, the NBA has kind of allowed itself to become all about the transaction market. And, obviously you're getting to the point where the transactions are the story again. But I turn on the NBA finals and with all due respect, I know that the Lakers are a big story. I don't care what's going on with the Danny Hurley story with the Lakers. Yeah. When the NBA finals are about to start. Why are you committing A block time to, this coach is Hurley is meeting with the Lakers? That has nothing to do with the game I'm about to watch, the most important game of the season until the next game. Mm-hmm. The NBA finals should be the only story that you care about. And obviously they don't have editorial control over what ESPN and ABC does, but I think that is a statement of the games aren't important. And when the league and its media partners don't make you feel like the games are important, then the games don't become important. It's a feedback loop.
Yeah. And you know what? I mean, hell, the NHL has been really, really good with, televising the Stanley Cup final, because the fact of, look, we'll worry about that stuff later. I mean, I'm getting physical play. I'm getting hyper-aggressive offense. I'm getting all of that. And so we'll worry about that come the off season. But at least it's like, okay, we got a little something here, but we'll worry about that a little bit later, And so my final question to you before letting you go, I mean, the Eastern Conference, I mean, I just feel like what I've always said and what I'll say in my ending is Boston, from the initial start of this, they got to end this thing quick, because you let this thing go to Game 7, I mean, that's just going to be bad news, because we know what Kyrie Irving's done in Game 7s. We know how he's been clutch with it, but you got to end this quick. And it looks like this is what may end up happening from here. So if Boston wins this whole thing, the Eastern Conference now, there's got to be some really good, some moves ups and shakeups at some point to really make the pivot to make it a better conference of what we're getting right now in the Western Conference, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Boston's obviously really good. I don't want to take anything away from Boston. They look like the best team, and they've looked like the best team in the league all year. They are the best team in the league. And, the biggest, I've seen this take kind of around this internet sphere. Dallas is trying to make Boston beat themselves, and Boston has a lot of scars and a lot of demons that they're trying to overcome to finally win this championship with the Tatum and Brown group. They're not falling into those traps yet. We'll see what happens on the road in games 3 and 4. And, again, you're 2 wins away. You just got to get one on the road, and makes your life that much easier. But when you look at this Eastern Conference, there's just a lot of turmoil. And so I don't think Boston is as far a runaway as everyone seems to think. Milwaukee Milwaukee's still a really good team. They had a really weird season. They're integrating a really important new player in Damian Lillard. They hired the wrong coach. They fired him midseason. They brought in a new coach. Doc Rivers is going to have, Doc Rivers got them to play defense and really improve their defense, but obviously he didn't have a training camp. So give them a training camp, give them an opportunity to tinker with the roster. Philadelphia was the second best team in the Eastern Conference by net rating when Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey played together. Joel Embiid missing all the time that he missed just killed them. Like they went from the 2 seed to the 7 seed just off the time that Joel Embiid missed. So, can you count on Joel Embiid to be healthy? Maybe, maybe not. The Sixers have a ton of cap room this summer. They're expected to sign, at least someone like Paul George. They'll re-up Maxey. That team's going to be vastly different and vastly improved. New York is super flexible right now. Jalen Brunson is clearly a kind of playoff performer. They have a clear identity. Julius Randle was out for most of the year. He is, if you either believe in him or you don't, but either way, he is a big time player that they'll either add to the mix or a big time trade piece that they'll use to add someone big to the mix. Yeah. Indiana's young. They get Pascal Siakam for a full year. Who knows what's going to happen with Cleveland? Maybe Cleveland breaks apart. Maybe Cleveland stays together. They get the right coach. Who knows? Orlando is, I'll vouch for the Magic. I think the Magic add the right offensive piece, the right point guard to kind of settle them down. Paolo takes another step up into stardom. Franz Wagner's knocking on the door to being an all-star too. That team's defense is really tough. They've played Boston very tough in the past. That's a tough team. And, I live here in Florida long enough. I'm not counting out Miami. Miami always seems to figure things out at some point. Who knows what they're going to do with Jimmy Butler and all that. But Pat Riley always seems to keep that team competitive. Boston's far and away the best team, and everyone's chasing them. But I don't think the gap is that far. Like, should Boston be the favorite? Just looking at all these pieces, if the season started tomorrow, absolutely. I'm not, you got to knock them off the throne, and it's not going to be easy. But I don't think the East is as far down as people think it is. Mm-hmm. The West was more competitive because the East had a lot of injuries in their playoffs. Yeah. The East, I think, is just as competitive. Like I said, on the last day of the season, the Magic were sitting in the 5 seed. If they won, or they're sitting in the 6 seed. If they won, they were the 5 seed. If they lost, they were the 8 seed. That's how tight the margin was in the Eastern Conference. If the Magic had gotten one more win, they would have had home court advantage, possibly be the 3 or the 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. It's really, really, really tight in the East, just like it is in the West. And, with the new collective bargaining agreement rules, especially, I think this is an era of parity in the NBA. We're going to see something similar to like what we see in the NFL, where, there are your favorites every year, but you're going to get a lot of new blood deep into the playoffs and a lot of teams that feel like they can win championships.
Boy, I'm getting a lot of nuggets, up on the show that I'm getting super excited for what, the future next season's going to honestly look like. I mean, I'm keeping my eye out, for the off season, how a lot of these teams are going to be showing off their identity of who they are and what they're trying to potentially build. But it's going to be a far, very exciting season nonetheless. And what we just got from this past playoff is what I'm hoping we get more of that come the next few years. But Philip, appreciate you jumping on by, man. But where can everybody find you to find a little bit of magic there with those Orlando Magic?
Yeah. The best place to find me is, you can follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. That's Philip with 1 L. And you can find my written work at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. And you can find my podcast at Locked On Magic, wherever you download podcasts.
There you go, folks. Just to keep you locked on the Orlando Magic right there. Appreciate